Warning: this chapter contains attempted suicide. 9 Times Percy Saved a Friend by Liana Legaspi. Chapter 5. Percy. Percy. In his defense, Percy fought it. It was a gradual breakdown, slow and overwhelmingly terrifying, and he was helpless to stop it, just like falling all the way down into the depths of Tartarus. And Percy wondered if that was what Luke felt like. No wonder the son of Hermes turned his back on Olympus. What good did the gods ever do? Really? They sat on their thrones, which he saved, and watched their kids run around like slaves, not even lifting a finger to help. Zeus, Hera, Athena, everyone. He could save Olympus, and they would still want to take a vote on whether to kill him or not, like he was a dog that bit its owner. Percy never complained. He never asked for any recognition or to be put in Olympus's Hall of Fame. All he wanted was a peaceful, average demigod life. Instead, the gods pulled him right back into wars and prophecies over and over and over again. And when Cabin 11 filled up with more undetermined kids, Percy felt like all his work was in vain. The gods never changed. They were still as ignorant and cruel as they were thousands of years ago, and Percy was seriously wondering if his efforts, the teenagers suffering from PTSD, campers who gave their lives for Olympus, was worth it at all. Thalia craving her father's love, Nico being shunned. That wasn't fair at all. His cousins were heroes. They deserved to be recognized. Raina feeling abandoned, Leo wanting to abandon them. Piper's bulimia, Jason needing and relying on Percy. It was all closing in around him. He was drowning in a way he'd never thought of. And then Annabeth. Percy's hold tightened on the handle. Annabeth, who saved the world, led one of the greatest quests of their generation, was rewarded with the horrors of Tartarus and forced to relive them alone every single night. He tried to be there for her as much as possible. He wanted to be there for her, but Percy shuddered. It was hard when he was having trouble working through his own issues. Tartarus, Percy mused out loud. At first, he didn't remember what had happened down there. It was all just a big blank, like when Hera wiped his memory. Percy grit his teeth, another thing to add to the list of what's wrong with the gods. But it was all coming back to him now, crashing on him violently and leaving him a complete mess. Sometimes he'd freeze up a little during a sparring session if one of Raina's strikes came just a little too close for comfort, and in place of his friend, he'd see the Nemean lion. Other times, like when he saw a couple of his friends from Goody picking on Jason, he would see Arachne towering over Annabeth. Not that Percy ever said anything about his little dilemma. The entire camp thought that their leader had gotten through Tartarus completely unscathed, save for a few cuts and bruises here and there, and they were all content and relieved by that. No need to ruin everyone's happiness because of a few minor discomforts, nightmares, blackouts, hallucinations, etc. You retrieved Zeus's master Bolton Hades' helm, Leo argued, and the sheer belief and idolization in his voice made Percy's stomach churn. You got the golden fleece and saved Jason's sister. Dude, you even held up the sky and earned Artemis's respect. And more. The way Leo looked at Percy reminded him of Julia. At least you were able to fix what you broke. You defeated Kronos in the end. Percy's eyes glazed over a little when he thought about the Titan War. Looking back on it, it felt like child's play compared to what followed. Actually, he managed. It was Luke. But I needed you, Leo blurted. There was no way the gods would have won without you. No, Percy thought sardonically. It seems they can't win without a lot of people's help. And what thanks did the remaining half-bloods get? They were left alone to fight yet another stronger enemy while their parents hid up on Olympus like cowards. What was next? What war would Percy and his friends, who, by the way, were dying at an alarming rate, have to fight for them in the name of family? Piper's eyes filled up with pent-up frustration and tears. It wasn't what it looked like, she said, but any charm her voice usually held was lost on him. Looking at Piper now made Percy feel hollow. A hero once confident and true to herself, reduced to this. Torn apart by the smallest of things, her mother didn't even find it important enough to intervene. interrupt an important quest to save Artemis in order to talk about his love life and give a vague warning that didn't prevent Bianca's death, of course. Aphrodite definitely had time for that. But stop her daughter from doing this to herself? Oh no, ultra skinny was the new thing anyways. Anger gripped his heart. It wasn't like Aphrodite could just have another daughter to replace her anyways if it went too far. I'm not going to judge. I know exactly what it feels like to fall off the pedestal people put you on, he thought. Trust me, Percy muttered, staring deep into her eyes. I won't. Jason was never really an emotional guy. No amount of Greek influence could change that. So when Percy's cousin looked up at him, relief written all over his face like a little boy trusting his big brother to make everything better, Percy knew that his poor excuse for rehab would have to be cut short. Jason had dark circles under his eyes, and his usually straight as a flipping ruler posture was sagged, and Percy wasn't cool enough to subject him to the job of babysitting a mob of immature, wild teenagers any longer. I'm really glad you're back, Jason told him, grin splitting his face. Percy cracked, forced, a small, exhausted smile. Yeah, I made her stay now, he said, strong, confident mask already set in place. Oh, gods, I'm sorry, Percy said. He had a sickening feeling of deja vu just looking at the bone. Oh, gods, it was even bent at the same angle as... Rachel tried to wave him off. I'll live, it's just an ankle. Percy felt like he was going to pass out any second. The ankle, the dark of the forest, the monsters roaming around. It was all just a piercing reminder of Tartarus, and he hoped Rachel didn't notice the way he trembled, or the feral way his eyes darted around the area, watching in mute horror as memories of just what unfolded in the depths of hell resurfaced. Whoever said ignorance was bliss knew exactly what they were talking about. Percy twirled the gun around in his hands. All the other demigods were healing. Olympus was safe. He chuckled humorlessly. Not that it even mattered. Give it a couple of years, there'd be another war, another prophecy, some other mess the gods made that he'd need to clean up. Percy sighed and lowered the weapon. Of course he wouldn't pull the trigger. Leo, Jason, Annabeth. People needed him. He pressed his lips together. Still, they were getting better, mending. Thalia's daddy issues were something of the past. People were getting over Nico's betrayal. Reyna was fixing her relationship with her sister. Leo was settling in. For good, it looked like. Piper was gaining weight again. Jason was living up to his dad's name and getting more popular in both worlds. Rachel's ankle was healing, though seeing it still made Percy sick to his stomach. Grover, well, Percy hadn't needed to protect that friend for a while. And Annabeth. Percy's shoulders slumped in shame, and he held the gun a little tighter. Annabeth deserved so much better than him. She should have had a strong, brave boyfriend who could actually do something about her nightmares. Not a screwed up demigod with PTSD and highly questionable thoughts running through his head. Not another Luke. Plus, Percy thought, twirling the gun around in his hands, during the war, the Vulcan and Hephaestus kids had made such high-quality weapons. Not to mention a wider variety. Explosives, tasers, flamethrowers, guns. They didn't stick to just swords and arrows. It'd be almost a shame to not put them to use. Percy slowly flipped the safety off and raised it to his temple. A life of misery, serving ungrateful gods, and dying an even worse death was all that was in store for him. Why not just cut to the chase now? He was meant to die exactly 1 year ago anyways. Percy's finger rested on the trigger, and he closed his eyes. He fought it. He truly tried. But this was one monster he couldn't just kill with a magical sword. Rather than a gunshot, a sharp intake of breath and a shocked voice saying, "Percy?" broke the calm, eerie silence of cabin 3. Percy was so startled he almost jumped out of his skin. His eyes shot open, and he felt like the curse of Achilles had been washed off of him all over again. 9 of his friends stood at his door. Rachel, Leo, and Grover's grins were slipping into stunned faces, their holds loosening on the blue and green balloons. Piper was carrying a birthday cake. Thalia, Nico, Jason, and Reyna stood together, twinkling mirth fading from their eyes. And Annabeth stood in the front, gray orbs unbelieving, not wanting to believe, and underneath, terrified. But despite it all, the gun didn't even waver. Not even when the blue cake dropped out of Piper's shaking hands onto the cabin floor. Percy? Annabeth's voice wavered, gray eyes frantic but also blank, like she wasn't sure if what she was seeing was even real or just another dream. That one word was enough to hurt Percy in a way he didn't know was possible. Leo swallowed, but he forced an uneasy grin. "Hey, man," he said. "What's with the gun?" Percy didn't think that was even worth answering. "Percy," Grover stated, eyes darkening like his worst suspicion had just been proven right. "Come on, put it down, please." Jason nodded and took a step forward, but put his hands up when Percy's hand tensed around the rifle. "Yeah," he agreed, but his voice cracked a little. Why don't we just talk, okay?" Piper struggled to compose herself. No, stop, don't. I'm not even going to use my charm speaking." Her eyes darted towards the others. "It hasn't been working since..." She breathed out rigidly. "Let us just talk about this. I know none of us are going to judge you, Percy." Raina nodded mutely in agreement, face unreadable except for the grim way her jaw was set and the strange, uncharacteristically vulnerable look in her eye, like she was an abandoned little girl. Thalia, who looked completely unfamiliar with the situation, took a few brave steps forward. "Don't be an idiot, Percy," she said, but her hands were trembling slightly. "You've gone through all that, defied every single prophecy that said you'd die like the irritating little upstart you are, just to give up now." Percy, horror gripping his stomach, finally realizing that this was happening, that his friends had actually caught him in a moment of weakness, managed a shaky grin. He pointed the gun away from his head casually. "Don't be an idiot, Thalia," he mimicked, struggling to maintain his easygoing facade. "I wasn't going to pull the trigger." Judging by everyone's faces, they didn't buy it. "Really?" Percy tried again. "Why would I? I'm fine." His voice cracked, and his friends exchanged brief looks. "Happy, even." He hoped no one noticed his eye twitch. "Olympus is safe. Again, the world's at peace. Not that it'll actually stay that way," he thought cynically. Leo's fingers tapped against his jeans rapidly, a nervous rate. "You're..." He hesitated before asking cautiously, "You're tired of being the hero?" "Oh, did he say that last part out loud?" Grover's gaze never left his best friend's face. "That's part of it," he said, shifting from one hoof to another. "But not all." Empathy link, Percy remembered. Right. He wondered just how long Grover had known what was really going through his head. The idea made him a little sick, and his fingers tensed against the handle, a movement that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. Nico did a quick once-over of the room, looking for some way to shadow travel so he could get closer to Percy and get the gun away from him! He knew that what he was about to say was cruel, extremely cruel, but Percy was easily guilt-tripped. "Bianca gave her life for you. The least you can do is tell us why you're suddenly suicidal, Percy." The reactions of everyone else was expected, sharp looks and shocked eyes, because, yeah, he kind of did just ignore the bright neon sign that said, "Do not cross this line." But Percy did start to lower the gun a little. Annabeth, eyes clear and coherent, took shaky steps forward until she was standing in front of her boyfriend. "This is real," she said softly. "Isn't it?" When Percy's voice completely failed to work, Annabeth choked at a bitter laugh. With tears in her stormy eyes, she said, "You promised." The rifle instantly wound up lying on his bedsheets uselessly in favor of embracing his girlfriend, mind flashing back to another time she spoke those words, only with reversed results. Out of the corner of his eyes, Percy was fairly certain he just saw Thalia snatch the gun away and hand it to her brother, who promptly crushed it under his combat boots, and staring at the broken weaponry, Percy couldn't really care less. Right now, he was just busy trying to reassure Annabeth that he wouldn't be breaking his promise anytime soon. Decorations and birthday cake completely forgotten, his friends hovered closer to him. Thalia rubbed Annabeth's back comfortingly, even though the daughter of Zeus knew her friend's pride would probably wind up wounded because of it. Piper and Leo stood behind Jason, while Grover and Rachel chose to sit beside Percy instead. Nico and Raina waited nearer to the opposite wall, but it was obvious they were ready to intervene if needed. "So," Rachel said after a few minutes of tense silence, deceptively calm, Is this going to be a 20 questions kind of thing, or... The words were spilling out before the oracle could even finish her sentence. He told his friends about his anger and resentment towards the gods, his memories of Tartarus finally coming back to him, how completely out of place he felt in the mortal world, and Percy even confessed how much he wanted to stay strong. For everyone, but just couldn't. Now, after several years filled with pain, sacrifice, and difficult decisions that could alter everything, Percy Jackson was falling apart in front of the very people he tried so hard to keep safe. And when he was through, heart completely poured out and darkest thoughts confessed, he fell asleep against his girlfriend's shoulder. This time it was Raina who spoke. "I had no idea," she faltered. "No, none of us did," Thalia said, eyes tearing away from Percy to her old protector accusingly. "Except Grover." The satyr reeled back a little, eyes looking sad. "I knew he was upset," he said guiltily. Piper glanced at him. "So why didn't you say something?" "It's Percy," Jason stressed, hugging his girlfriend closer to his side. "He'd put his own problems aside to help us with ours." He narrowed his eyes at the floor. "No matter how much it hurt him." "Then it's our turn," Annabeth said firmly, gray eyes stormy as ever as she met each of her friends' gazes. "Percy's saved each of us more times than we can count. While we've been wallowing in self-pity, he's been putting up a strong face for each of us, even though he..." She trailed off and swallowed. "The least we can do is be there for him." One by one, each of the demigods sat around Percy. Piper sat on the floor next to Thalia, cheek pressed lightly against Annabeth's knee, and Pinky hooked around the knot of Percy's shoes. Leo plopped between Rachel and Grover, and Jason sat behind Percy, back to back. Nico perched himself at the foot of the bed, and only Raina remained standing, watching the scene with dark, keen eyes. Knowing what was going through her head, Thalia's eyes bore into the Praetors. "Get over here, Raina. I don't care if showing a little compassion is weakness to you. Percy needs us." Her eyes flashed. "If you were in his place right now, he'd stay. He'd stay for you." After a brief look of indecision, Raina slowly lowered herself at Percy's feet, hair tickling Leah's knee, and they silently waited for the nightmares to come, Annabeth's and Thalia's words ringing in their ears. As usual, the girls were right. He was always right behind them, picking up the pieces and saving them even when they weren't on a battlefield anymore. Percy had never let them down. It was their turn to save him. The god turned off the recording and paused. He was expecting to catch the heroes of Olympus having fun and celebrating like most teenagers seemed to do, something to make his viewers smile and feel a little lighthearted. But this? Hephaestus twisted his lips. This definitely wasn't the kind of reality TV he was expecting to get. Percy Jackson, the most famous demigod of this generation, got on camera attempting to commit suicide. If news got out about it, Olympus would be angered by his frailty. Their greatest hero dissolved into a broken godling. Hephaestus clasped his hands in thought. Although, he thought, torn, the boy had a valid reason for wanting to enter Hades' realm so soon. Already the gods were ignoring their children like mere slaves. He hadn't even realized Leo wasn't truly happy, that his boy blamed himself for disasters he couldn't have helped or prevented. Olympus wanted a feel-good show. But he needed this, the truth thrown right back into their face by none other than their own hero. Besides, Hephaestus added, needing to be saved by his friends wasn't weakness. Not at all. And if anyone begged to differ, well, there were 9 dangerous friends who all had Percy's back. Even Ares would keep his trap shut this time.